I turned on the software, Mid-Journey at the time, to see what's possible. And within the first hour, it was just mind explosion. I'm sitting in my office, my little studio at home, and just literally tears in my eyes from mind comprehension of seeing the moment of collapse from thought to reality. It was that moment, and all of this happens in seconds. And you, as a designer, as someone who works in innovation and creation of solutions, I saw that collapse instantaneously. I couldn't verbalize it yet, but that was the insane part, and I just started to just gun for it.
From San Francisco, California, you're listening to The State of Creativity. I'm your host, Rachel Paul. This podcast explores the people and ideas defining creativity today. We're living in a moment that rewards speed and scale above almost everything else. And while many argue that AI is finally freeing creatives up to do more of what they love, the pressure to produce more, faster, hasn't gone anywhere. Which is why, as we explore in today's conversation, one of the most radical things we can do with these tools isn't to move faster, but to go deeper. Joining me is Branko Lukic, a cognitive architect, designer, and innovator. Born and raised in Belgrade in the former Yugoslavia, Branko's career took him from some of the world's leading design firms, including Frog Design and Ideo, to founding his own award-winning studio, Nonobject, which was later acquired by Logitech. Today, Branko is the Vice President of AI Design and Innovation at VF Corporation. Branko was also the speaker at CreativeMornings San Francisco in December 2025, where he explored the theme of innovation and introduced the concept of perfect flaws. The idea that our imperfections and idiosyncrasies aren't limitations, but the very thing that makes human creativity irreplaceable. In this conversation, we talk about the first time Branko used AI, an experience that moved him to tears, how decades of meditation and mindfulness have shaped his creative practice, and why our unique imperfections are our most valuable assets. Without further ado, let's dive into the state of creativity. Where did you grow up, and how did it shape your view of the world?
I grew up in Belgrade at the time when Yugoslavia existed. There was a country called Yugoslavia, and it was kind of a communist time. So it kind of feels weird when you look back and you say, wow, I was born in a previous millennia. And now I lived a little bit in communism times. And it was a different type of environment than here. We didn't have much. Coming from a working class neighborhood, working class family, we had just a very small apartment where my brother and I grew up, just very small, maybe less than 500 square feet, to get a sense of how that was. And we had to learn to share and to adapt and to be together. There were times that were intense, but there were times where we actually really appreciated being in smaller space, and you learn to just appreciate things you have, and there were only a few things we had. At the time, food or toys or things like that, media, entertainment, we had 2 channels. There was a black and white TV. There was a cartoon each day at 7:15 p.m. I remember that very clearly. And since it's only 2 channels, they're all, government channels. Okay, cool. You turn it on 2 minutes earlier. So in the picture, the TV warms up. Fascinating to look back how much technology changed even within that very short period of time.
Do you think that growing up, the technology that you had around you played a big foundational role in your interest in technology and
Yes.
art?
Ever since I can remember, I was holding a pen or pencil and was drawing. It was way before I was able to write. Writing, in fact, was difficult for me to conquer. I remember being in the first grade of elementary school, and I spent the entire afternoon writing a 4-line poem. Probably something to do with slightly dyslexic, maybe understanding of how to do letters. Today is easier, but much easier, obviously, but that was difficult then. But drawing was always natural. Ever since I can remember, the one thing I did always was transporting things that I saw in my imagination to paper. Rockets, spaceships, planets, whatever, creatures, like anything that my friends and I were doing at the time or were interested in. That was our window into the world, and having those little pieces of paper anywhere, and reading comic books. I didn't know that this was called art. Just did it. It was maybe the way to express the inside world. And then technology was right there because my dad was electronics engineer, and he was just incredible with the stuff that he has done at home. The instruments he built, his whole little setup there, because my parents had to sleep in the living room, and my brother and I had our small tiny room two beds, like, very little space to play, but we still find a way to do that. But then in the living room, my dad used to have a little table. Today's standards, that would be an elementary school size desk for a single pupil. But he was building oscilloscopes, instruments for measurement, for frequencies, for all kinds of stuff. And during his day job, he would do electronics at his work, and then telecommunications, and then when he comes home, he would continue to do these things. And so we would hang out next to his table and kind of look around. I remember when we were 6 years old, that was before I learned to write letters, we were already soldering circuits. We were soldering, like, he said, okay, let's build a little circuit for LED. It's a little kind of circuit that you can play with LED turning on and off in certain periods of time, with a little potentiometer. So we did the whole process from drawing with the marker on a PCB. He did the acid and stuff in the kitchen. So we basically did the whole process. And that was definitely a huge impact on technological side. And maybe aligned with that was science fiction. My father used to work in movie industry before he became professional electronics engineer. So in his younger days, he worked on sound design for movies. We used to sit down with him. I was 12 years old, and we watched Space Odyssey 2001. And I have no idea what the film is about. We just watched the whole thing. And now I was able to see later how this all kind of played its role in influence. So sci-fi was a big deal. Along with Tarkovsky, the Russian school of film, Polish film, French, Jacques Tati, all kinds of things that we were exposed to, and then science. Although we had only 2 channels, looking back, we had some really great program. It was all these things, and then ever since I was little, it was this deep interest into what's the meaning of life, what is inside of things, what's hidden behind the surface, why is the world the way it is. That was probably the strongest thing that always drove all of my interests.
And it sounds like the family structure that you grew up with really promoted this idea of like anything's possible and like creativity, and you can make something out of nothing, which is such a cool concept that I don't know that everyone like is raised upon with that belief. It sounds like your dad was very influential in the opportunity of like creating something out of nothing, and you kind of had to based on what was available to you.
Yes. When I look back, pondering on that question, I realized that it's basically mom and dad gave space to us, but I don't think that they did it on purpose. What was really interesting, and I feel so lucky because of that, is a lot of my friends were forced into a specific track. And I would often hear from my closest friends, my parents are bugging me, they want me to be a lawyer, a doctor, or an engineer. Those were the 3 things that in Belgrade at the time, and I think only later I learned it was around the world everywhere, like people wanted their kids to be one of these 3 things. Everything else is, not relevant. What's interesting when I look back, first of all, I don't remember once that my dad ever asked for homework or what am I doing in school. He actually never asked me anything about school, nor my brother. Mom was just concerned that she only wanted us to do the homework. But she was not really too deep into what's your next assignment, like absolutely zero. And Dad was so focused on the stuff that he likes to do at those times that I remember him drawing, and he was very good at drawing, but no one in the family, I don't remember that anyone was really into drawing. My brother certainly not. And what they did, they allowed space. And so we could do whatever we want. All they said to us, find the work that you love to do. That's the most important. And I remember Dad clearly said this, a few times throughout childhood and young adulthood. He would say, just make sure you find a job that you like. Because if you don't, it can become and feel like a prison. It could be really, really tough. And so that stuck with me. And even early on, there was a strong signal that I wanted to do something with innovation, something with changing the world to a better place. And I could see the relationship between imagination and possibility. The world of mind is just so broad and so big. And then through imagination, through sci-fi movie, I could see that I knew that this wasn't real, but it felt real. And then only later I learned that innovation, and through my father, seeing what innovation is, being drawn to the story of Nikola Tesla. Obviously, it's a big deal for Serbians since everything that Tesla has achieved and how he went about science and how he was discovering things. So I was deeply drawn to that too.
I'm so curious, like, how growing up in Belgrade in the war and everything going on, like, what first drew you into design and how did that spark your interest? And was design the first thing you went into in your career when you went to school and everything?
It's interesting, really interesting question, because I think it's almost this journey of you're on a path and then each Y fork does its own thing. Like each day is a Y fork. Like whether you go left or right, it changes the way some decision will be made or whatever. So I think kind of just following intuition without really, it's a kid, obviously, you don't even know. You're just doing stuff. So, but I think I've done thousands of hours of drawing. And it was few of us always competing. Who's the best drawer? Who can do the best car, horse, anything you want. And at the time, I didn't know what's the profession that I want to do other than I just wanted to do this thing that I saw in front of me, which was imagination put on paper. It could be characters, could be comic books. It was different things at different times, but every day I would do hours and hours of drawing and discussing science, doing stuff with my friends. We were tinkering, making stuff. We always wanted to make spaceship. How can I make spaceship in Belgrade? But we were attempting, and then submarines and whatnot. And the father had this really interesting array of books on the shelf. And that's another fascinating thing. He never told us anything, go check out the books. He never did anything like that. That to me is so fascinating. He just had them there, like dozen of books. But I'll tell you a few of the titles. Patanjali, all writings on yoga, basically the postulate of yoga, 5,000 years before Christ. Patanjali book, Autogen 80, which is basically, it's called autogenic training. I don't know how to say in English. At the time, that was very popular. Transcendental meditation. He had psychological training for the yogi. Then Swami Satyananda Yoga Nidra. So I've been doing Nidra when I was 14 years old. Just by sheer interest, I was drawn to that. And
Well, it was also around you.
It was around me, but just on the shelf. And that there was, some yoga, hatha yoga books and Nikola Tesla book and some book on physics and space. And we had extensive discussions with our dad. Every time we go out for a walk, we would talk about stars, life in other planets, aliens, are the same rules of physics applying onto other planets, other planetary systems, things like that. So anyway, where I was going with all this was forming, when I look back, a different perspective, a broader perspective perhaps on how things can be. So he was apolitical, so he wasn't interested in the difficulty of life in Serbia. I never heard one complaint from him. Oh my God, we don't have money. Ever. He just lived. And that was incredible. So I think through that, all this kind of impacts you in a certain way. And then at some point, someone told me when I was 14 years old, 15 years old, but there is a job where you can go and design cars or products and you can be paid for that. And I said no, that's not possible. Is it for real? Yeah, it's called design. And I knew at that point, that was a breakthrough. It was like this one of those breakthrough moments, like, okay, that is what I was looking for. That's the job that I want. You can innovate, you can create, and you're paid for that? I still couldn't believe. Which then led to high school for industrial design, which is completely crazy to think about. That at the time, in 80s, we had a high school for industrial design based on French system. I don't even know if this exists today.
It's so surprising to me to hear, although maybe not that surprising, that like your dad had all these books on yoga and meditation and was very attuned to that. I connect to that. When I was in college, I went to school in San Diego and I was really homesick my second year. My mom growing up was really into yoga and meditation, and she would go to the Insight Meditation Center in Redwood City.
Wonderful.
And I somehow was added to this Facebook group of this group on campus that was a co-ed Buddhist fraternity that hosted weekly meditations, and I just started going to those, and it was a really wonderful way for me to feel more connected to like what was familiar to me. It made me feel closer to like who I knew, I think, without knowing then like the person I am. And you don't in the moment realize how significant just the presence of a book in a room growing up is. But I think in your psyche, it leaves a mark on what you value or what feels familiar to you.
So how did meditation felt for you at the time when you went to Inside Meditation Center, or how did it feel?
I think in high school it was hard for me to really be like, what is this meditation? You know, like I don't want to just sit in the room all day and like be quiet kind of thing. More so in college though, there's like so much chaos going on all the time and there's so many different paths that you can decide to take. I went to a really big school with like 40,000 students, and I think the practice of showing up week after week and then, you know, on a daily basis, that routine of just sitting and grounding and like remembering what's around you and tapping back into just being, it really helped me figure out my path, I would say.
As you mentioned that you inspired me to kind of reminding me of another aspect that was important back in the childhood, where so they provided space for unconstrained space for us, but then mom pushed us into sports. Not that she was really into sports. She did like Formula One a lot, but she wasn't really a sport kind of person. But she wanted us to be healthy. And she pushed us into water polo and stuff, and we did a lot of sports. And later, when you look back at it, it's basically discipline. So there was some structure.
Absolutely.
Discipline that comes from sport, the team play, to understand that together you can do more, and it's less about, you know, me, but basically it's the team. So that was a really big impact too. Kind of building a little bit on what you were saying. But I can understand the chaos at university, and I can only imagine how it is when you have 40,000 students.
It's just a little overwhelming when you're like 19 years old and you're like, oh my God, what do I do? Like there's so many options. But it's exciting too.
Yeah,
you know?
totally.
Like you can do whatever.
It's amazing. Yeah. Exactly. You feel that the world is your oyster. I think that's a good feeling to have.
So you've moved between art and industrial design, you've written a book, and now you're working with AI. So did these shifts feel intentional at the time, or do they only really make sense in retrospect?
I think it's in many ways evolution of possibilities that we sometimes understand as work or function of work or tools, and also understanding of what's possible. So I think that through career, the base was industrial design in the very early days. And before that was just something I can say is art, really, just a free expression through drawn or painted thing. And I think what's interesting is when you look at those, as soon as I finished university for industrial design, we started an agency, 3 of us. And that agency forced me to go into a whole new area, which is advertising, branding, packaging design, environment design, exhibit design, office design, interior architecture, all kinds of different things because he had to survive. So we decided to start a company, and early on, this was the type of business we could have, which in return was a whole other new school for me to learn. So basically now schooling yourself in a real life situation where you have to go get a project, pitch for a project, prove that you can do it, but you're actually doing stuff that's beyond industrial design. And then computers showed up, and we started to do a lot of visual design and created fonts for our studio. I mean, because we couldn't buy some of these fonts, we had to make them. So all kinds of things like that. Maybe that you can relate to that world a little bit. And so as the time was going, you start to realize that it's not necessarily if you're an industrial designer or packaging designer or architect, or if you understand that there is a problem that you can solve using the toolkit you have, which is the creative toolkit. But the toolkit is actually skills that you build on the ground where actually you encounter people and you need to help people. And all along, ever since I was a kid, when we were in our little old Renault 4, that's a not known car, I think, in the United States. It's a very small car. That was our car, family car, very small. But then I would look at this car and I knew this could be better. Like the world around us can be better. And in times of, cloudy weather and stuff, I would stand on the window of our little room, and I would look out and I look at the world of communist Belgrade at the time. This world can be better too. There's things we can do to make it better. I think I know how, somehow as a kid. Meaning that it was an early signal of the innovation aspect of the work, because for me innovation is really critical. So that innovation is kind of universal for any of those new areas of design that you tap into and work because you have to. You actually learn a great deal, but then it's basically kind of the same in many ways.
Just different application, but like
Different application, yeah.
same toolkit kind of.
Exactly. And then you have to learn how to grow the company, how you handle the team, and how do you build a good creative culture inside the small studio. We were a relatively small studio, 14 of us, mid-90s. That was, for us, a big deal.
Did that become challenging for you? Because I know, even in my own experience, what I'm passionate about is the creation part, you know? Like, I have so many ideas and I love to execute on them. And it's great to have many hands on deck to bring your ideas to life. But then you get into the whole like people management and business acquisition and relationship building, and that detracts a lot of time from the actual creation part. Was that something that you dealt with as your team was expanding and as you built from the ground up? Was that something that you felt empowered by, or maybe was it harder for you?
It's a really good question, and that a certain amount of cognitive capacity goes there. Mm-hmm. And I'm like you. I love to create. I mean, that's where I really want to reside. I really love to problem solve something that really moves the needle.
Yeah.
When you create something that moves the needle, for me is the most important. I was keenly interested in business success of what I'm doing for the client that I'm working for by making a product that people love. So if people love the product, then in my simplistic mind of a kid, that meant, well, I know how to make this product so people really like it. And then that should probably reflect back through profits to a client. And it turns out to be true. And then that cycle is closed. So it was never for me design because of design. And so when you go and think of the creativity, as you said, we love to create. I love to have a reason why I do something. Obviously, there are times where you just want to create. There's no reason. You just want your hands to create things. But when it comes to professional work, I think intent.
How do you tap into and learn to trust intent and lean into it without even knowing fully what it is quite yet?
When you're in your 20s, you're trying perhaps to figure out, what is my style? What is the way? How can my work can be known? Because maybe I do something unique. And later you realize maybe those are not the right questions, but you do many different things. You're trying many different things. But I would say when I look back at the work, I'm surprised by the work that was done. I consider maybe some of that work not fully consciously executed, but because at the time I did not do lots of meditation, so the intent pushed through. But perhaps I wasn't fully aware of certain things that you do. Mm. But as you meditate, you increase vision into the inside. You can understand better small signals. You can understand better your way of understanding things.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. You can understand the way of understanding things. And you can allow your mind to show you the possible path that feels right. And so with meditation, you can be more confident and more certain into a specific direction, because it increases the depth of how you understand things. That's what meditation does to me in simple ways, that it's not about being slow, really. It's about being more clear and being able to see more layers. That's what naturally happens. Somehow you see more layers to what you're working on.
Right. Because arguably all the layers have always existed and are always there, but having the clarity to dig that deep and see it.
And another fascinating thing about layers of seeing, at times you think maybe there is no end to how deep the layers go. There are so many deeper layers of meaning that commonly we spend time even comprehending. And often our minds are so busy with daily things that you're not even at the capacity to see those and feel those.
Right.
Because meditation actually allows minds to clear, and you can see more clearly.
Do you meditate every day? Is that a part of your practice now?
I try. Contemplation is definitely always there, and to have as many mindful moments as I can.
I want to get into a bit of your experience in AI, because I would say this whole entire path has led you to where you are now, which is very AI centered, well, human centered, but through AI and the contrast and all of that. So I would love to hear from you. You were a designer, a writer, all of these things. And you've said that when you used AI for the first time, it brought tears to your eyes. So can you walk us through that experience, and what were you feeling in that moment, and how has that impacted your life?
I'll answer the question first, but then I'll give you a little background story prior to that moment.
Okay.
So it was the winter 22 to 23. I turned on the software, Mid-Journey at the time, to see what's possible. And within the first hour, it was just mind explosion. And I'm sitting in my office, my little studio at home, and just literally tears in my eyes from mind comprehension of seeing the moment of collapse from thought to reality. There's always a journey from the thought, inner signal you have, okay, maybe I want to create this. And then this becomes an idea. The idea needs to travel through our biomechanical system, which I call these days biological hardware. And it has to go through a lot of layers of firmware, biological firmware and biological software. Firmware being parasympathetic neurosystem, and then mind software, and then skills and everything. So to control and export the idea into something. It was that moment, and all of this happens in seconds. So now I'm trying to verbalize something that happened a long time ago. And you, as a designer, as someone who works in innovation and creation of solutions, I saw that collapse instantaneously. I couldn't verbalize it yet, but that was the insane part. And I just started to just gun for it. Basically, the rocket was on, and I don't even remember how many hours I spent that first night. And soon enough, I was at experiment number 30,000 within a few months. That's 30,000 experiments. But it was the ability, what was really profound, that's the tool. And again, early results were hilarious, just really funny. But I realized that prompt, and again, all this happens in creative tears, all of these things at the same time. If I do Coppola, kind of slow down and try to show what happened. No prompting, but using visual synthesis, using images, because already then I'm designer, so I use visual thinking, and I solve problems way earlier than that could be, way before they're verbalized into any kind of explanation. That's how I think human mind works. And what's going on here, you have this idea, and then you can immediately then transfer that in various ways into the system, and you get some results. And then you can steer these possibility spaces with images. It became immediately clear to me this is the path that I want to explore more. And on top of that, I can already see how it's shattering all of the human speed frameworks that we have built in design, in anything, basically in anything. And that was just mind-blowing. And you can see I could not really stop. Every time coming back from work, I would go into my garage and just continue to experiment and study what goes on, study my mind, study how that works, what's happening in this co-cognitive process. Because it's not really co-creation. Co-creation is the term that's often used, but I like to go deeper into what causes co-creation, what's before co-creation. Co-creation is the outcome. Before that is the co-cognition. And the reason I mention this is because that's why my tears came out. This is not a typical tool. This is a cognitive tool.
I know when you had started answering this question, you said you wanted to rewind a little bit before AI. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I just wanted to rewind a little bit just to give you a little context. So when I came to the United States, I joined Frog Design and worked within a global design agency. It was, at the time, I think, the largest design agency in the world. And then IDEO hired me, joined IDEO for 5.5 years. Just incredible, the number of projects in both places. There's so much learning, so many projects. So many industries, straight from my little country where I could not do these things to mind exploding, supercomputers. We were doing supercomputers then, 98, 99, 2000, electric cars for Ford, all kinds of different things. And digital systems, the beginnings of UI UX. Bill Mogridge was, Hartmut Esslinger was my mentor at Frog, and then Bill Mogridge was my mentor at IDEO. He's one of the founders of IDEO, just an amazing, amazing person, forever in my heart. And he taught me so much, both of them, Hartmut and Bill, in their own ways. And afterwards, I left IDEO 2006 and started my design studio, my design innovation firm that got acquired by Logitech in 2018. The reason I mention all this is just so you get a perspective on actual work, practical work. People are always interested, so what's the volume of work? What is in these hands that talk? So it's a lot of innovation work, all the very hard projects. So when you think of all those, our studio was known, we were focusing always on hard problems. We were not necessarily focused on aesthetics. Aesthetics was one of the outcomes of the thinking. And I mention all this because a lot of the work in my studio and in all of the work that I've done is cognitive. And a lot of it is what is that we are solving and why are we solving this? So what is the emotional relevance of the thing that I'm working on? How is this going to help human? How is this changing how we do things today? And that encompasses digital, physical, software services, all of it.
Yeah.
Because our studio is multidisciplinary. And the reason I mentioned this is 2017, I realized that AI is more near than I thought. And I was totally blown away by capacity of what AI can do. It was just early days. So I diverted resources of the studio into creating a serious pitch for AI-powered design. You can only imagine how early was this. Nobody at the time. And then I pitched that to the CEO of Logitech and chief design officer. But I think I can totally understand why they probably didn't respond much. It was just probably flew over because it was just too early. Yeah. And then 22, 23, things started to change dramatically, and it was completely clear that everything aligned. My work was always really, actually in the end, is the workings of the mind. Mm-hmm. The products actually provide function that's obvious, that's physical, but in the end of the day, experiences reside inside human mind. And so when this cognitive tool showed up, I knew that this is what I've been waiting for. That was the second moment in life. The first one when someone told me that there is design, and now AI was the perfect convergence of all of the skills that I was focused on my entire life. And basically I switched from that into AI entirely.
I think AI teaches us so much about humanity because there's so much contrast between what humans have always aspired for when it comes to, I think, capitalistic work, which is perfection and efficiency, which I think AI checks so many boxes for, kind of. And I think also it's contrasting what you call a perfect flaw, which is like the human, our superpower. So through your time with AI and working with it, what have you learned about yourself and humanity as a whole? And can you explain this concept of perfect flaw?
What I love about AI, which is maybe not something that's talked about a lot, AI pushes us upwards. What does that mean? It means that it's pushing us to examine, to face ourselves. And I'm fascinated by that. And it's so interesting. Entire history, we always dreamt of having ability to build something like this, an intelligence that's on par with us or maybe better and stronger than we are. And now that we're close to the point people are freaking out. It's the nature of humans to freak out. Oh my God, that's going to take over the world. I don't have that perspective. I look at this as a very advanced, extremely unique tool that we have never had before. We always had to adapt to tools in the past. You had to, chisel the rock, learn how to use specific tool to, work with the ground, and then you can put some plants and do some agriculture. Or you just had to make tools and learn how to use them, even software. We always had to learn how to use things. Otherwise, you're done. If you don't know how to use things, then you're like left behind. But AI is different because AI adapts to you, and it's a cognitive tool. It's the first time we have something very unique, a tool that adapts to you, and it's a cognitive tool. And the reason I mentioned this, that's profound. So AI, it's so interesting. There are not many discussions on how it's pushing us to face ourselves. So when you work with AI, I encourage people to really go deeper into what they want out of their own work. At the end of the day, I look at AI as a beautiful amplification, an incredible tool to amplify human values. But we need to learn how to do that. We're all learning right now. And that's, again, what's incredibly exciting is that there's no really one right way to do things, because AI is like water. It just touches everything. It fills any shape. It touches everything, changes all the frameworks that we have as humans that are human speed built. You heard me say this before. And it's like our systems and our thinking is like this ink that you put in water. And what happens when you put ink in water? It just goes everywhere. And I love that. I love that AI is challenging us. It's a chance to actually reconfigure human society. It's the way to reconfigure how we do things if we approach it properly. If we approach it not just as something that's efficiency, gain, scale. That's important. But I think speed is not where wisdom is. And speed is not where discernment is. We need a lot more wisdom and discernment in creation of a better world for all of us. And I think AI has a chance to help us with that.
Well, I see it as twofold. Like AI applies to society and humans as a whole and the way we just structure and live all of our lives. And that ties into norms and societal values and like full structures of like how societies function, which a lot of people are saying will or could or should change drastically as AI continues to evolve. And, you know, people are scared that it's taking jobs away and all this and that, but it's all this, you know, shift as a whole, like an overhaul kind of. But I think also it's highlighting what is valuable as a human, like what we on an individual level can create and be and, you know, can lean into. I think for hundreds, maybe thousands of years, a lot of people, as they've grown up, have had to put their creativity to the side because it doesn't fit a box of, oh, I need to be a doctor so I can provide for my family, or like this is a value to my society and I can earn a living doing this. And I think humans are inherently creative and like artists, each and every one of us, like, and that's something that I think a lot of people put aside as they grow up. And I'm excited to see doors open for the opportunity of artists moving forward.
Totally. That's so powerful what AI can allow you to do, and to face directly and experience directly how your creative thinking can amplify in real time. Of course, there are so many things we need to learn. We don't know the long-term impact on cognition. We don't know the long-term impact on how is it changing education. I always try to look into what's the unit, the unit of this whole system, where it's a human. A single human is a unit of this new big change. And then I like to look into AI and that human, how do they work? Is it only just using the tool for efficiency and scale, or is it co-cognizing with tool and understanding deeper the condition, my own condition as a human being, what actually matters, and then how can that work be changed and done? Can we do some entirely different work that we have never seen before? We still have problem of looking at AI with many old lenses. What I love about AI, it creates so many new lenses. And it is, for a lot of people who appreciate security, it's disorienting because AI is a very powerful tool. But again, it's the driver's seat is where the human sits and creates things. But we also have to learn what is that balance between you and the AI. And here's one example. You used to have brush, and it's just, even now, okay, we still have brush. So you would do watercolor or something, you would paint, but it takes years to kind of master the brush to be able to express your vision or something. That could be applied to anything. I'm using a brush as an example. Could be a writer with a pen. But then the writer with the pen, that's, a few kilobytes per second, is a huge world in your mind. Then you kind of go through all of your understanding of how to write, all the rules, all the cool things and the ways of structure, and then you write something. But with the AI, that's exponentially changing. And so the exponential change is what blew my mind that winter, 22 to 23. How quickly you're not really controlling the small detail of a design, but you're jumping possibility spaces. And that's just such a huge change that it takes time to comprehend. It's powerful, but we need to find ways how to understand it and how to apply it for improvement of our world.
For me, what's valuable is it kind of reads between the lines of what I say. What I write into a prompt doesn't need to necessarily make ABC sense in a linear way. I can brain dump so many thoughts and it makes sense of it, which is very helpful for me because I don't naturally think that way all the time. But the other night, I've always journaled, like since I was like 7 or 8 years old. I have these journals of my entire life, which I love so much. And I've noticed in recent years, it's become a less frequent practice for me, but I sat down the other night to journal and it felt so foreign to me. And my attention span for the time it takes for me to get my thoughts and put it on paper, there's so much I want to say in my head, but it takes a minute to write it out by hand. Yet I find value in that because I am not AI, so I can't think as fast as AI does, I think, and it helps me make sense of my own thoughts. And like, I have to prioritize what I want to write down and build that order in a way that I think feels really good to me.
Yeah.
It just kind of, it's another kind of mindfulness practice where you have to just sit and be slow and intentional about it, which is a big contrast to what AI does.
Yeah, that's really well said. And I use it for somewhat similar, in a similar way of the function that you explained. AI is just really powerful at seeing underlying patterns in something, in your thinking or something you may not necessarily see, and that's what's really fascinating. So again, as AI pushes us upwards, we have to examine our mind more and how we go about things that we do. It's not just about learning the tool. That's what I keep explaining and sharing with everyone, that it's going to be, I think, increasingly important to do mindfulness practice along with the understanding AI tools and how these tools actually work. In my work at Logitech, I was a co-founder of a creative and design AI lab, where we have conducted a lot of experiments, a lot of sprints, looking at cutting-edge tools and how they impact product development, playbooks of design, and also teams. How this changes our typical process, or any typical process of designing a product, when you can have AI completely exponentially change certain innovation aspects of a project. It's just fascinating to go into this whole area and try to understand the next generation of innovation in products. Is going to be really fantastic.
Absolutely.
But again, it's a little bit unknown how education prior to entering the world of design or creative or AI, how will education work? Because I think AI is absolutely phenomenal as an education tool because it allows neurodiverse children to be able to learn about the world in a completely custom way. I also worked worked extensively on innovation for education as well. And there's I can't talk about specific projects, but it's just fantastic when you see, once you apply AI in certain ways to tools for learning, it's so obvious how it dramatically changes the way you can learn about the world.
Can you explain the concept, as we wrap up, of perfect flaw? That was a big part of your topic at Creative Mornings, and just what a perfect flaw is and how it's an inherently human feature.
During my time at Logitech, when I focused completely on AI, I had to work with innovation across all business groups and with many different groups in different types of industries and different types of activities and products and services. So that was one major avenue of applying AI to innovation, to understand how AI changes that. It'll be soon clear why I'm mentioning this. So that's that business aspect of design. At the same time, I was doing my own experiments in parallel, unconstrained, not necessarily tied to only that, but tied to creativity, to human mind and how creativity changes, how design changes, or your expression using AI system, the exponential nature of that tool. And what I shared in the framework on Perfect Flaw was really the result of 3 years of work in combination of the business side of AI, as well as the creative and design side of AI in my own experiments, that I realized that the value of each human is going to be incredible. The perfect flaws, the unique values, because each human being is imperfect. We're all one of a kind. There's no two Rachel. There's like you. It's just one like you. And that's extremely unique. And in the work with AI, what's inherently there are limitations with AI because it's continuously averaging to some mean, to specific result. Sometimes you can imagine this as a very long funnel. So then there is a known problem. It's called knowledge collapse. By the same token, there's also creativity collapse. And you can see that when people use AI without too much intent, without putting their creative fingerprint into the system, we start to see sameness. We start to see high volumes of similar work. And you can probably reflect on that too. Seeing a lot of work, and there will be even more work that's synthetic and it's just not necessarily something we can relate to. And how do you change that? Well, we have to find a better way to transmit human creative fingerprint. Those perfect flaws form your creative fingerprint. How do you transfer that into the system? As of now, we have several simple ways, but they're still very low bandwidth. So there is a prompt. So then you have these huge worlds in your mind, huge creative infinite worlds, and then you have to use all of your cognition and capacity to transfer that through typing letters,
right,
through a little 56K modem to explain this gigantic world you have in your mind. And so we still have ways to go. There are still many hills to climb to figure out how these tools will work better, how to transfer your creative fingerprint into the AI system so it does not become the same as everything else. So there's this interesting paradox. If we continue to just rely on what AI tells us without inputting values, continuously inputting our own values, that's a little bit of a tricky and dangerous territory, I think, long term. Now, there's another problem. AI has not solved, there's still no solution for continuous learning. So now as you and I talk, we learn about each other. The moment we walk later outside of the house, you'll be learning continuously about things around you all the time. And you continuously form new links and new knowledge. In one way, you continuously create new knowledge every day. And you express that knowledge through the work that you do. And so that's rich. And then we can put it into the system. But then the system, the way it works, often would be averaging many of those into certain vectors. And so the very beautiful area to figure out, and I think key and important area, is how to preserve authenticity. So when you see the outcome, it's not a question, what kind of tool people use. We're focused so much on the tool. We need to actually understand what is this new outcome, a new kind of IP, new kind of design or creative solution in which you natively created this with help of AI. But it is you who created the outcome. So your perfect flaw is captured and it's in the system.
Less slop, kind of.
Yes, exactly.
Did you hear that was the Merriam-Webster word of the year this year?
No, I did not.
It's slop, which I think describes well what you're
saying.
It's good,
yeah. It's good.
Yeah.
It's just we're in a silent era of AI, and I think there's still ways to go.
In 5 to 10 years, or even closer than that, where do you see AI and creativity? Where is it headed? What should people be aware of as AI develops?
It's a great question. We need to continue to understand, to continue to deepen our understanding how to use the tool. Not just what the tool can do. That's one of the keys. To understand how your intent gets transformed and amplified through the system. Because in the end, that becomes an artifact that's shared with a larger society. So obviously there is a big impact in that pipeline. So I think that deepening our understanding of the tool will lead to deeper understanding of our own creative condition and our own creative processes. And each of us can be completely unique because the AI is so adaptable, that's fine. But to really be able to preserve authenticity, and not in a protective way, but to learn how to transmit our authenticity into the system. And therefore, the next 5 to 10 years should be incredibly exciting because it allows you to shorten from thought to reality distance to almost an instant. And it's unknown and exciting and kind of scary and beautiful to try to visualize it. It's very difficult, but how does that change everything? Because everything can be changed now. Outcome of design, outcome of general creativity, outcome of films, video games, any kind of media will be greatly shifted. At the same time, I think it's going to do something fun too. It will highlight the value of regular human work. I think us seeing barista make coffee or baker make bread would be even more astonishing. Like, wow, this was made by hands. So I think that's going to be still, it's kind of interesting how AI really continuously changes us to examine our own condition. I think it's going to be super exciting.
Yeah, it's exemplifying that contrast.
And I'm super curious, and that's the area where I spend the most time in understanding how it changes design, how it transforms businesses and organizations in a sense of when you apply AI, it's not enough to just have a tool, but how to use the tool for the positive transformation of business. That's where I spend a lot of time. Like, how does that work? Because with exponential design, today you can disrupt entire industry in one day.
So do you think in 5 to 10 years, just everything will be flipped on its head structurally?
It sounds very strong and can almost feel like chaos.
Right.
But I do like the nature of Wild West a little bit in this because, as I said before, design and innovation is all about changing norms. And AI is changing all the norms in so many ways. And I love for humans to focus on the positive side. How can this benefit us? Rather than a lot of cognitive power in a public discussion goes to the side of the fear, rather than thinking, okay, yes, it's going to automate certain things, but what does that mean? You know, how can it free and change the way we do work? Like, what's the future of work? We should be focused on that, and that's actually, I think, quite exciting.
What gives you hope about the future of creativity?
If you think of AI as this powerful source of light, just like the sun is, it's just a source of powerful light. And each of us is unique. And when I think of perfect flaw, I think of a human being as a lens. So as AI is the source of light, and you're that lens, then you decide and express yourself into the world. So AI is the light, and you're the lens. And I think that's what I think the next era of creativity will be about.
And my last question is, who or what is inspiring you lately?
Slowness in terms of questioning speed and scale. How much of that is wisdom? How much of being slightly slower leads to different results? And sometimes even stopping for a second and looking at something and then realizing, okay, this is the right thing to do or not the right thing to do. So I think being able to pause for a moment and then continue is inspiring, because there is so much input coming from the outside. And thinking about going back again to mindfulness and being able to, almost like in Matrix, when things can just stop. But you can see the 3D world. It just everything pause for a second, then you can observe and you can continue. You can see a lot more in the moment of pause. So that's what I'm inspired by.
Good practice, for sure. Well, thank you so much, Branko. I really appreciate you joining. This was a really lovely conversation.
Thank you for having me.